Hello, Dan Proft coming to you with another installment of Against the Current, live from the Skyline Club atop the Old Republic building in downtown Chicago. My guest today is Vicente Serrano. He is a former Telemundo news anchor. He's a radio talk show host of Sin Censura, AM 750, 8 a.m. to noon, Monday to Friday. He's also a documentarian. He did the documentary A Forgotten Injustice, which we'll talk about in our conversation. Vicente, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, just to set the ground rules, if you're not called on when you want a question asked, I will throw you out of here. I will have security remove you. So just so you know, let's lay the ground rules. I don't want a Ramos situation.
No,
please
no.
So let's have a conversation about immigration, which is dominating the presidential campaign right now. I'm not sure Republicans conceived at the beginning of this campaign that it would be as dominant of an issue as it is, but with the entrance and the current electoral success of Sideshow Donald, as I call him, Donald Trump, it's the issue that's dominating. Let me just take a step back before we get into what some of the candidates have said and ask you, what should U.S. immigration policy look like, or what values should be represented in U.S. immigration policy?
That we discuss the lives of human beings. I think we're dehumanizing the debate when we talk about things. Like Chris Christie suggested that we should track these illegal immigrants as FedEx packages. I think that we need to understand that the vast majority of these people are here not because they wanted to leave their countries. It's because they needed to. And I think that immigration reform...
They needed to for political asylum, they needed to for economic opportunity, all of the above?
All of the above. And I think that when we are irresponsible in this debate, as Donald Trump has been, we're not putting attention to human lives. These immigrants, like it or not, are human beings. And like it or not, we're benefiting from these illegal immigrants, or undocumented workers, whatever you want to call them. And we're hypocrites if we don't acknowledge that. And we need to sit down and have a conversation, yes, to secure the borders, but also, what are we going to do with these people? We're not going to deport them, or at least we shouldn't.
So Governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, whose parents emigrated to this country, right? He's Indian American.
He's an anchor baby, right?
I don't know if he's an anchor baby, but his parents emigrated to this country, so he's first generation American. An incredible success story. Indian American, first minority since Reconstruction to win statewide office in Louisiana. That's a pretty good trick, and then to do so with re-election as well. So he said of immigration in a campaign ad that he cut, follow the law, learn English, adopt our values, get to work. Anything wrong with that?
No, I think he's right. But what do we do with these people that don't have that opportunity to follow the law? Because, for example, Mexicans don't have the opportunity to follow the law as an Indian immigrant. Why? Because there are not enough visas available for these people. And in some cases, like in my case, we came to the United States almost 20 years ago. We waited like 10 or 15 years for our visas. And we were able to wait because we were poor, but we were not in extreme poverty. But ask a guy from Central America with no job, with an area devastated by a hurricane, for example, to wait 10 years for a visa. It's unrealistic what we're asking these people. And also it's unrealistic to think that we can move this country forward without the immigrant labor, the illegal immigrant labor. Let's be honest. Who's picking up strawberries and tomatoes? Mm-hmm. We're not. We won't.
Well, so let me ask you this. So how do we decide who gets to come here illegally and who doesn't? Right?
That's a debate that we need to have.
So, for example, there's 200,000 Syrian, many Christian refugees sitting in a UN refugee camp on the border of Jordan because they fled the repression of the Assad regime. Should we say to those 200,000 who need a place to go, who have no place to go, who are in a UN refugee camp, well, we're just going to take you because you have a place to go? I mean, how we could do that for dozens upon dozens of countries. Can America absorb all of those individuals who have a legitimate claim, either political asylum or economic opportunity? Can America absorb everyone who wants to come without some change in immigration law and perhaps access to welfare state benefits?
I'm not sure about the benefits because I don't think there are many in my community, in the Latino community, that will agree that we all should live off these benefits, the government benefits. And I think
They don't agree that we should live off government benefits?
No, I mean, they want a job, they want to have a better life, and they understand that having benefits from the government is not necessarily the life they want to have for their kids. And I think you're bringing something very important to the table. You know, I don't think we can accept everyone who is looking for a better place in this country because it's as unrealistic as amnesty. I don't want murderers and drug dealers and rapists in my neighborhood. No one in the community, in the Latino community, will agree with that. But the fact that the United States, America, has such an important role worldwide, I think we at least should talk about what's going on the other side of the world. And that's why the example that we're going to set with our experience with immigrants is going to be so important. It's going to impact what's going on the other side of the world. Because this is not an issue, I'm talking about immigration, between Mexico and the United States. This is an issue that is a historic issue, and it has happened all over the world.
Well, it's a global issue too. I mean, and not just a global issue in terms of people from all over the world want to come to America. Thank goodness that we're still a beacon of freedom and opportunity the world over. But in addition to that, you have European countries dealing with refugee populations and dealing, frankly, in a much more draconian way, or at least there's popular support for much more draconian measures in European countries, for example, than there is popular support, and then there are proposals for such draconian measures in the United States. So it's not like the United States is being unduly harsh to immigrants compared to what a lot of Western countries are doing in other parts of the Western Hemisphere.
And probably that's why our government hasn't been so outspoken or worldwide being outspoken about what's going on the other side of the world, because we don't have a moral right to say anything, because we haven't been able to solve this situation. And unfortunately, for political reasons. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority in this country, the citizens are for immigration reform. I agree that we need to secure the borders. I agree that we cannot go back to amnesty by Reagan and do nothing after that to make sure that we, have a more organized immigration.
Well, so let's talk about securing the border. It's not. I'm not so sure that building artificial structures is the way to do it. It seems to me that you change incentives and you change behavior, right? An immutable law of the human condition, people respond to incentives. So changing the incentives, could that include, in your opinion, things like you come to this country, you want to work, you want to expedite your entrance into this country, then sign away access to transfer payments, access to welfare state benefits. Is that something that would provide some common ground?
I don't know, but let me tell you about an idea that I had.
Okay.
How about if we invest in these countries, and we
invest in Mexico?
Yeah, we invest in Mexico, Central America, South America, and instead of giving them incentives to come to the United States, we make sure that we give incentives for them to stay there.
Yeah, but what does that look like? I mean, you have a lot of these governments in Central America, in South America, in Africa, frankly, in parts of Europe that I wouldn't want to invest in. If it was my money, I wouldn't invest in them. Because,
We're investing in China.
well,
And it's a dictatorship.
well, I understand that you can make an argument about investing in China as well. It's one thing to trade with other countries. It's another thing to provide essentially foreign aid. I mean, we're going to provide foreign aid to Venezuela. We're going to provide foreign aid to some of these banana republics. I mean, is that a way, does that money get down to individuals to disincentivize them to coming from this country? Or does it just fund kleptocracies?
It's just an idea, and probably that's a conversation that needs to be, that we need to have.
But what about waiving welfare state benefits? If the argument is the people come to this country to work, by and large, isn't a way to weed out those people that are coming to work versus the small percentage of people that are coming to cause trouble or coming to access welfare benefits, isn't that a way to separate those that are desirable because they want to work from those that are not?
And how about the citizens, the kids that are citizens? Are we denying them if we move forward, for example, with this idea of their benefits?
Well, we're not denying them anything. Their parents are saying that we are coming here to work to support our family. So we don't need welfare state benefits. I mean, now you could argue that I wish Americans would sign away access to welfare benefits too. I wish they would as well.
We all should.
But I wish they would as well. I'm on board for that too. But I mean, just in terms of trying to deal with a way to change incentives to separate out, and it doesn't, I'm not just talking about H-1B visas. You don't have to come here with an advanced degree. You come here and you want to work your butt off and work up the economic ladder to work in a restaurant, to owning a restaurant, fantastic. But to do that, is it so much to ask? You want, number one, you want the process expedited. Number two, you want to come to this country. Well, there's an exchange, just like in any good negotiation. You give something in order to get something. I give something in order to get something.
And I think that's an idea that I wouldn't oppose necessarily. I think that I will be open for discussion. The reality is that, we need to be serious about digging into this situation. How many immigrants are living off welfare benefits, for example? What's the contribution of these immigrants for Social Security, for example? People.
Those are the ones working.
Yeah.
Right.
And how many are not working?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't trust the government accounting for much of anything else. Why would we trust them to have an exact number of how many people are in this country illegally? 11 million, 12 million, 20 million. You hear all kinds of numbers. I don't know what the
last time I checked at that bridge where I go to work, where I get off from the expressway to go to work every morning, you know what? Let's be honest. I didn't see many Latinos, many immigrants asking for money. And we need to be serious. If we really want to have a conversation about immigration, we need to be very serious about ourselves as a society. Because we cannot be, how do you say it, Dan, with my broken English? That word doesn't come.
Don't pretend you're broken English. Don't use your broken English as some kind of excuse.
Because we like to take advantage of this labor, cheap labor. We love that we have our toilets clean, that we have our fruits on our tables, that we have good construction workers, we have good gardeners, but we love to criticize and throw stones when we have a crisis.
Well, I mean, look, I agree that there's some scapegoating that goes on, but I go back again to say, as a free market kind of guy, and I think people that are similarly situated ideologically to me would say, well, look, I believe in the free movement of capital. Capital flows to where it's treated the best. I believe in the free movement of labor. Labor goes to where it's treated the best. And obviously, a lot of Mexicans believe that their labor is treated better here than in their home country. And it's not exclusive to Mexico. We just talked about China and India of late. I mean, in 2000, I think it was Mexican immigrants to Chinese and Indian outnumbered 5-1. Now, more Chinese and Indians in 2013 than Mexicans. So it changes. And we've seen this throughout the history of our country. It changes. It was the Chinese, it was the Irish, it was the Italians, it was the Central Europeans. Now it's Mexicans and Latinos.
And don't we deserve the same shot?
Yeah, right. But
let me say something
Okay.
that probably will love the Trump supporters that are watching.
You better be careful. I mean, they're going to make me give out your cell number.
We have to be tough on our governments. We need to be tough on Mexican government. We need to be tough on Central American governments. Because when you see a Hispanic, in my case, talking about immigration and being critical of not having immigration reform, people think that we forget that the original problem
Is they're fleeing
is
these
back,
countries.
is back home.
Right.
If we have a way to pressure our governments with immigration reform, I think they won't have excuses to stop this situation. For example, when we had the crisis of these kids crossing the border illegally by themselves, Obama called
the DACA program. And,
no.
well,
this situation at the border,
the Central
this wave
American
of Central America,
refugees.
yes,
Okay.
The Obama government called Peña Nieto in Mexico and said, either you help us to solve this situation or you help us to solve this situation. And what's going on right now? Unfortunately, the wrong way to solve somehow this situation is you have a more strict laws in Mexico. And I'm saying it's the wrong way to try to solve this situation, because then you have people that are treated worse in Mexico than what we complain here.
Well, let me ask you a question. You mentioned, kind of small percentages, but the small percentages dominate the debate, right? Because no one is kind of predisposed to be against. Very few people are predisposed to be against someone who wants to come here and work, make a better life for themselves and their family. Everyone understands that unless you came over on the Mayflower, at somewhere during the course of your ancestry, you had a family member do the exact same thing. So people are sympathetic to that, but they're not sympathetic to this, and these are just the numbers. 2014, these are ICE numbers. 193 murders, 426 sexual assaults, 16,000 DUIs, people that were here illegally. In 2013, according to a now infamous exchange between Sarah Saldana, the head of ICE, and Senator Ted Cruz, ICE released 104,000 criminals in 2013 back into the general population. And so does that represent a small percentage of immigrants? It does. But they're committing a disproportionate disproportionate percentage of the crimes, and thus implicating immigrants more generally. I mean, it's the same. It's the same.
Comparing to what?
Well, think about it this way. You have a small percentage of African Americans that commit a preponderance of the crimes relative to their population, right? Relative to 12% of the U.S. population. A small percentage, most African Americans are law-abiding, but a small percentage commit a disproportionate number of crimes, and the recidivism rate is high, and so you have a crackdown in urban centers. This led to truth in sentencing. This led to minimum mandatory sentencing. So you can see the reaction. But wait a second. You can see the reaction is the same, because when the government doesn't do anything to deal with what we all acknowledge is a small but real criminal element, and Americans are being victimized, and everybody says, yes, we should do something about that, and nothing's done about it, you have more and more criminals released back into the population. People say, the heck with it all.
Let me try to swallow what you're saying.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, so this is a real issue. What do you say to Kate Steinle's parents? Do you say una cosa pequeña, as Luis Gutierrez said?
But no, it's not a small thing. Okay. And I have been very critical also of the bad apples in our community. I don't want those bad apples, because those bad apples give us bad names. But why don't you question the media and the general market focusing on these stories and not focusing on stories like a guy named Vicente Serrano that came here without speaking a word of English, came here to finish a dream of becoming someone. Probably I'm still on that situation, on that path. But we focus on the bad stories, and we cannot. How many kids in this country have been raised by an illegal nanny, by an undocumented worker? We raise the good kids. We have beautiful stories all over the country that are not reported.
Well, yeah, this just in, the media sensationalizes violence. I mean,
And that's sad. That's sad by itself.
That's across the board. That's not exclusive to immigrants.
But going back to the prison population, come on, Dan. Is the African American community providing the vast majority of the population? Is the Latino community providing the vast majority of the population? Come on, let's be honest.
Are you saying the vast majority of both those populations is law-abiding?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
No, but
Right.
but even in prisons.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
you know,
Disproportionate to their percentage of the population, but they're also committing a disproportionate percentage of the crime.
I
mean-
don't necessarily agree with that.
So it's like Shawshank. Everybody in prison got screwed by their lawyer, or are they guilty of these violent crimes? I mean, again, 2010 to 2014, these are ICE numbers. 121 released illegal immigrants murdered Americans.
And I don't agree with that.
I know you don't, but the question is not whether we agree with murdering. Obviously, we don't agree with that. The question is,
No.
how do you have a system that addresses it when you have a president and a lot of politicians that just kind of want to bury their head in the sand and say, well, that's a problem. We agree. We want to do something about it, but we're not going to do anything.
That's a
about
problem when you make this issue a political issue.
Well, of
Then
course
you
it's
have
a political
the extreme
issue.
right and the extreme left that are as bad as
Well, I understand, but this is about the lawmaking process.
That's
so
why,
it's necessarily
because we
a
don't
political
push
issue.
we don't push for the right buttons. I mean,
What do you mean?
yeah, I mean we shouldn't be talking about this. I mean, and it's not.
We wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't have these stats that I just rattled off. We wouldn't be talking about it. We could spend more time talking about the more endearing stories.
But the reality is that we always going to have these bad apples. Even the people that came in the Mayflower, some of them were criminals. Don't tell me.
Well, okay, but
Don't tell me. Come on.
No, I don't.
Dan.
I don't want to relitigate the composition of the Mayflower crew. Okay, what I'm saying is you have a system. Let's just use Kate Steinle, since that's a celebrated case now. Terrible murder of this young woman in San Francisco.
Yeah. That's sad.
The guy that killed her, 5 times he was deported. How do you have a system where you get deported, you're pushed out of this country 5 times, and you keep coming back? He should have never been in there.
But you're focusing on one person,
Yeah, but
and we're millions.
Well, I understand, but that one person, if you're Kate Steinle's mom or dad or brother, that one person matters. If it was,
And it's the responsibility of those that had been impacted positively, a positive impact, impacted by an immigrant, to speak up.
right. I mean, well, that's right. But I mean, you say we should talk about this issue in human terms. These are human beings. Well, they're human beings that are being victimized too.
Yeah, of course.
So again, I mean, I'm not getting to what we do to change our immigration system such that you have local law enforcement cooperating with state law enforcement, cooperating with federal law enforcement to get people we know are criminals and send them back to their country, whether their country of origin wants them or not. You're out of here.
A few days ago, out of O'Hare Airport, a family left the United States for good because the father was deported. He's not a criminal. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is, we have a broken system that even the good people that doesn't recognize even the good people. When I hear we're looking for criminals, and the immigration authorities are looking for criminals. What do you mean by criminal? Because people now think that that people crossing the border are criminals.
Well, it's breaking the law. It's breaking
Yeah,
U.S. law.
but
I
you,
mean,
you break a law because you run a stop sign. Does that make you a criminal?
Well, it makes you have to pay a fine.
Okay.
And if you don't pay the fine,
And
then
I
you
think,
escalating punishment.
I think, in a responsible debate, to tell whomever wants to stay here, that needs to pay a fine, needs to play by the rules, learn English, pay taxes. They're already paying taxes, most of them. And yes, we need to secure the border. So what I'm saying is, you're asking me for my idea. Well, let me tell you something. My idea will not look close to Donald Trump's massive deportations idea. It won't look like tracking FedEx packages as Chris Christie. It won't look as close as building a fence at the border, on the Mexican border, at the Canadian border. That's dehumanizing the debate, in my opinion.
What about, though, Chris Christie's idea, not to compare people to FedEx packages, but to, 40% of illegal immigration comes to the airports, right, overstaying visas. What about that? Your identification has your visa expiration attached to it, and we do have some ability to track these people and track people that are overstaying their visas. And if you're overstaying your visas, you have to go. That's why we have a visa system.
I agree.
Okay, so you're not
If
opposed
you
to
wanna
tracking in general.
No. But
Keeping account.
But when you compare people
I understand that.
to packages,
I understand that's reckless.
come on, I have a problem.
Yeah, I understand that's reckless. Okay, so what about something like we had from, 42 to 64, the Bracero program, where you had essentially a guest worker program. We brought Mexicans.
Let's exploit you for some time, and then we'll send you back.
Well, wait a second. We brought Mexicans in because of World War II and the need to ramp up production, right? Mm-hmm. And then it got extended and extended again because of what you mentioned before, which is the agribusiness, basically. So what about a guest worker type program? Because isn't it true that a lot of people who come here illegally want to work, want to make money, but ultimately do want to go back?
Yeah, but work under decent circumstances.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about a legitimized guest worker program.
But
so
that program was legit.
I'm not talking. I understand. Our history is replete with examples of imposing human suffering and treating people inhumanely. I concede the point, but I'm just using that as an example of a guest worker program. I'm not saying we should take that program that was enforced for 22 years and bring it forward to the 21st century. I'm just saying something like that abides the strictures of humane working conditions.
But also, then, probably that's also an idea that doesn't recognize these people as humans.
Why not?
Because if you come as a bracero or as a guest worker, and you fall in love with an American woman, what do? And that's going to happen, like it or not.
I saw that Matthew Perry Salma Hayek movie. I get it. Yeah, I know that happens. Yeah, I get it. Well, okay, but then you still have, if you fall in love with an American citizen and get married.
I don't want that love to be an offense to anybody, because we have a lot of mixed families.
Yeah, I'd marry Salma Hayek if she'd have me. But, I'd give her, well, she's a citizen. But, someone like Salma Hayek who needed citizenship, if she'd be willing to stay with me for an extended period of time, I think that's a fair trade.
No comment on that.
But so seriously, what is wrong with that idea? This is a way in for the economic opportunity that so many seek. But, you're here for a specified duration. You're providing your work in exchange for compensation, and then you go back. What's wrong with that?
And what do you do with your kids? You have them in school. They dream about, they learn, because you want people to adapt. You want people to become Americanized.
Well, but you can.
Then the Americanized people?
No, but you can move yourself through the naturalization process while you're working. In fact, that may be something where you incentivize working as the means to expedite a naturalization process because you've proven up that you're going to assimilate.
That sounds pretty interesting to explore. The problem is that with the Bracero program, we didn't have that.
Well, okay, and I mean, let me ask you another question too, because this goes to your documentary, Forgotten Injustice, which I'm familiar with. How much does that, another ignominious period in American history, the repatriation of, what was it, 1 million?
2 million,
2 million
people that were deported, 60% of them, around 60% American citizens that were kicked out of the country for one reason.
Because they were Mexican.
They look like me.
Right. And so how much of that...
By the way, my grandma was one of them.
Okay. So how much of that period, though, how much of that poor public policy, inhumane public policy, like the Japanese internment camps, another,
Sad.
relatively close and similarly ignominious period in American history, how much of that informs the sensibility that Latinos have about the immigration debate? Like, we're going to go back to what we did during the Great Depression, and we're going to separate families, we're going to deport people that are American citizens under the current regime, and that's the real fear driving an unwillingness to have this conversation we're having now about waiving welfare benefits, a guest worker program, and other such maybe kind of common ground measures where we could advance this flag a little bit.
The problem is that we don't know about this.
We don't know about what?
About what happened in the 1930s, and we need to learn.
Who's the we that doesn't know?
We don't know. We don't know. I don't know all the details. I'm pretty sure that the production team doesn't know about this issue. The people watching this will be surprised to learn that this happened in our own country. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned it before. If you don't know history, you're bound to repeat the mistakes over and over again.
But you also mentioned the 1986 Immigration Reform Act was a failure, and there's a lot of people that don't want to repeat that failure again too. So, repeating failed portions of history cuts both ways.
Yeah, I think so. And going back to what happened in the 1930s, I think it's an example of letting people like these mostly Republicans that are, competing to bring the most aggressive anti-immigrant initiative they can. I see it. I see it then. I took a dive many years ago to complete this documentary, and the same language is being used in 2015.
What do you mean? Give me an example of the same language.
This is an invasion. They need to go back. Let's deport them all. Or as Mitt Romney said during the past campaign, they're gonna self-deport. That's a reality. And unfortunately, I don't see that we, as a society, as America, as the United States of America, we stand up and say this is wrong. That we let the passion flows and that passionate debate that should bring us to the table to discuss these issues, even though I don't agree with all your ideas, you don't agree with all my ideas, but we're having a candid conversation about this situation. Instead of doing this, we go up in arms, and that's how you say it.
Yeah.
And we find we try to find the scapegoat. And unfortunately, the scapegoat will be the least informed, the least educated about their rights, and that's the immigrant community.
Do you believe that you mentioned the Republicans competing for the most anti-immigrant policies? I'm not sure I'd characterize it quite that way. I mean, do you believe the caricature of the left that all Republicans are racist and they hate Latinos, and all the people on the left, the Democrats, are looking out for immigrants, those persons that are here that are undocumented, looking out for their best interests?
No, let me start with the left.
Okay.
They have been hypocrites too, because they have taken advantage of the disenchantment of the Latino community with Republicans. And they have been promising things that they haven't delivered. President Obama, for example. He promised to solve this situation. He promised immigration reform, and he didn't deliver. Luis Gutierrez has been the champion of immigration reform and hasn't delivered. He hasn't been good enough to convince his colleagues in Washington that his idea is a good idea or the right thing to do. And about the Republicans, you gotta admit that we have some voices on the left, the extreme right, that are racists.
Well, for example.
Do you think, how do you call someone that wants to take away my rights as a citizen of the United States because I was born here, because my parents were undocumented? Isn't it that racist?
Are you talking about Donald Trump?
I'm talking about whomever wants to end those rights.
Well, I mean, I think the idea of deporting Americans is repugnant to me. So I agree with that. I think that you have some...
Thank you. I was really worried about you.
Well, right. No, you can stay.
Okay.
So right.
I was to go.
Yeah.
I was gonna
No.
show that the Ramos
Right.
tantrum.
Well, no. I think the ex-Telemundo reporters can stay. Univision, I think they have to go, according to Trump. Ramos and the whole gang. I'm pretty sure they have to go. And I have friends at Univision, too, so I'm going to miss them. But thankfully, I don't think Trump is going to be the President of the United States. But I agree that some of the rhetoric has been intemperate. I think it's been reckless, mostly from Trump, because he's just kind of a reckless, witless guy. I'm not so sure that I'm not so sure that's racist any more than Gutierrez, who has been known for his rhetorical flourishes too. Any more than you would say, you would abide a characterization of him as racist against white people or hating white people because he's so kind of pro path to citizenship, to be generous.
What do you think it can happen to me if I go on my radio show and ask, when we become the majority, as the statistics show in some years, that we do the same that these candidates are asking for the Latino community to impose on whites?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. I don't know that there's another candidate for President of the United States, at least, and frankly, most of the responsible candidates for high elective office as well on the Republican side, who've proposed deporting American citizens.
Well, even worse. Ben Carson is the name of the guy?
Yeah.
The only African American in this campaign?
Yes.
He's asking to, destroy caves where these illegal immigrants hide in the mountains. It's sad that this campaign, this rhetoric, is gaining track, even with our other brothers and sisters in the minority communities.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you fear, or maybe fear is too strong a word, but are you concerned that the Latino community, even with your kind of demographic trajectory that you just described, that the community is going to wind up similar to the African American community, where they vote 90% for the Democrats, and thus they're taken for granted by the Democrats and they're ignored by Republicans? Because you have fairly pro-immigrant Republican candidates for president, serious ones, perceived to be tier one candidates, people that could actually win the nomination, like Jeb Bush, who was a pretty successful governor in Florida, who enjoyed substantial Latino support when he was governor of Florida. And he's getting 25% of the Latino vote, just like basically every other Republican not named Trump. So if the Latino vote is not there to compete for, then do you fear or do you have concern about it being completely marginalized and ignored?
I think the Republican Party, as a whole, should send a clear message that the Latinos are important for the party. And they should speak up against these stupid ideas. And then you'll see that the Latino community will come by itself, automatic, to the Republican Party.
You really think so?
I believe that that a sector of the Latino community are more Republican than Democrat because of the values.
And you think that the only
And
reason they're not voting Republican or affiliating with the Republican Party or supporting Republican candidates is because of the tone of the rhetoric?
Why would I support a party that wants to deport my uncle?
Well, but it's
my
not.
cousin,
But it's not a party. I mean, it's
my
the same.
brother-in-law.
It's-
In
but-
my family, we still have undocumented immigrants.
But it's the same party that has Susana Martinez as the governor of New Mexico. It's the
Yeah,
same
Susana
party.
Martinez, that it wants to take away the driver's license for undocumented people.
Well, okay, but so maybe it has less to do with Latino affiliation and more to do with public policy choices. But Raul Labrador, who's a Hispanic member of Congress from Idaho,
But that's
I mean,
but that's
Nikki Haley in South
But
Carolina,
let me tell you,
etc.
Dan, I think you brought another good point.
I mean, you act
who's,
like
who's Latino?
Well,
People will say
people with Hispanic heritage. I mean, I don't know. How do you define Latino?
No,
People's
that-
country of origin is
Would
Central and
would
South America.
Would I be happy if Ted Cruz wins the White House? No. Would I be happy if Marco Rubio wins the White House? No. That's what I'm talking about. When you talk about Labrador,
Would you be happy if Hillary Clinton won the White House?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't think she will win the White House.
Okay, so you're running out of candidates. Who do you got left? Who do you like? Who do you think either side is striking a sensible chord on immigration that should be expanded, that should be paid more attention to?
I think Jeb Bush was doing a good job. Unfortunately, he stumbled on the anchor babies.
He's Latino,
Defense.
according to Jeb Bush.
What? Who?
Well, he checked that he was a Latino on his voter registration in Florida.
I guess.
I mean, I guess if Caitlyn Jenner can be a woman, then Jeb Bush can be a Latino, and America redefined, right? But it's so. But
Let me go back and say something that before I forget.
Okay.
I applaud Jorge Ramos for standing up against Donald Trump. What might sounded like a criticism of Jorge, I mean, I do believe that
It wasn't like
this
he was
is
asking a
personal.
question that Trump never got asked or answered before. He was asking a pedestrian question. How are you going to deport 11 or 12 million people? And Trump's answer is always, I'm just going to do it, trust me. I mean, it doesn't matter what the issue is. That's his answer for every question. Right. But I mean, but there's nothing heroic about what Jorge Ramos did. He just created a disruption to draw attention to himself. Which is smart, I guess, for Jorge Ramos.
Or probably to the issue. That's
Well,
when
the
we
issue needs
focus
more attention.
When we focus more on the person and than the issue, I have a problem. That's why I have been very critical of my own community. That's how shallow is the debate in our own community too.
It's all cult of personality, you mean, rather than kind of the underlying public policy.
Yeah. I think that in the Latino community we have a lot to grow to. We have to learn a lot from the African American community and the civil rights movement. We need to reflect on our history in the United States and say, you know what, we have committed mistakes and we need to be open about them. You know, like the amnesty of '86, many people committed fraud to apply for this, and they got their papers committing fraud.
Right.
But at the same time,
And we got the amnesty part of it, and we never got the border enforcement, which is why people are kind of once bitten and twice shy. That's understandable, isn't it?
yeah, it is. But let me throw this back to you. What would you do to solve this situation of 11, 12, who knows, million people? Deport them all?
No, I don't think that's feasible, and I don't want the police state action that would be required to kind of do it one at a time, as some people say. But I think that there are obvious things where the federal government is falling down on the job. And remember, the responsibility of government at every level is the primary responsibility, first and foremost, physical security of your constituents. And the federal government is not abiding that primary responsibility. So first and foremost, we're going to have local, state, and federal law enforcement not just communicate with one another, but work together to make sure that if you're deported, you're deported. You gone, to borrow a
Yeah,
Hawkism.
but that shouldn't be used to go after an entire community.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
it has happened in the past.
Well, I understand, but I think you can draw bright lines and say if you've been convicted of a crime.
Why you here?
Correct. Period. The end. End of conversation. And you're gone. And you want to talk about expediting the process in. We're going to expedite the process out. And all these bull-jive excuses about, oh, well, this country doesn't want it back and we're trying to figure it out. You are gone. You're going to be drop shipped back to wherever you came from because we're going to separate those people that want to come here and build a better life and contribute to America from those that don't. And so the changing the incentives goes back to what I telegraphed earlier, which is things like you want in, waive welfare state benefits. We got a welfare state problem as it is. So you want in, prove you want in to do what you say you're coming to do by waiving access to the quote unquote safety net, which, as we all know, has become a hammock both for those that come from other countries as well as those indigenous to this country.
Even with the deportation system that we have, it needs to be reviewed. The fact that we're just
only so much
throwing
review.
people out, it's just as irresponsible as what we're discussing. The problem that the Central American countries have because of the gang members that were deported, and they created the gangs stronger in Central America, it's somehow our fault. We need...
How is MS-13 our fault?
Because the MS-13 were not formed in Central America. They were formed in the United States.
Well, so
we deport them, and then we have a problem, a regional problem.
Right. So, no, our original problem is that our borders are so porous that we allowed gangbangers to come into this country and set up shop in urban centers.
No. Like it or not, the gang situation didn't start in Central America or Mexico or South America. It happened here in the streets of Los Angeles. It's where the Mara Salvatrucha was formed. Then we have a problem, a security problem in Central America, and that's why people are fleeing. And somehow we need to be responsible, even when we deport people. Make sure that we're sending criminals. We're sending criminals. We don't want them here, right? Well, make sure that the countries where we're deporting these people are responsible also, and make sure that they know what to do with these people.
Before I let you jump, you mentioned the Latino community needs to learn something from the Black community in terms of civil rights. What exactly do you mean? The Latino experience in this country is starkly different than the African American, than the Black experience.
We're not as organized. We're not as educated about our rights. And we need to take a look at that. The relationship between the African American community and the Latino community, because we're minorities, has been very fragile. And instead of seeing our differences, we should look at our coincidences and learn.
So you mean maybe more effective as a political movement,
Yes.
essentially?
Yes. Up to this point, we haven't had a Latina in the Senate of the United States.
Okay.
We haven't had a Mexican in the Senate of the United States.
But you just said it's not just any old Latina, it's not just any old Mexican, because you're not necessarily a big fan of Susana Martinez or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. It's got to be one that adopts your policy perspective. So that's the danger of race and gender identity politics, isn't it? It turns out it's like the NAACP. We want African American advancement so long as it's liberal. When it's conservative, when it's Ben Carson, we're not such a big fan.
But for example, in the Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, we have a situation there that even in our community has to be discussed. The Cubans are not necessarily as informed, I would say, as sympathetic as the experience from other countries.
Yeah, but
because they don't have a problem with the immigration.
Well, but they do know something about fleeing repression, don't they?
Yeah, but in my opinion, and I might be wrong, it's not the same. It's not, and I'm not saying it's not risky to cross the ocean to get to Miami.
Pretty risky.
But I don't know.
Not to mention, communist
but-
Cuba wasn't exactly,
but
didn't
you-
turn out to be the paradise that the Castros had promised.
But you get to Miami, and you're good. Mexicans cross the river, venture the desert, and they're not okay. That's something to think about.
All right, Vicente Serrano, he is a former Telemundo news anchor. He is the current host of Sin Censura, radio program on Sin Censura, 8 a.m. to noon, Monday to Friday. He's also a documentarian. He did the documentary Forgotten Injustice. Vicente, thanks so much for joining us on Against the Current. Appreciate it.
Thank you.